Huh.
Hey guys, we're live today. This is David Tran. Today I'm with Nathan Krauthamer and Albert Wu, and we're going to talk about how they got into buying Cashflow Properties. So we're going to start with Nate. Nate, start with your amazing story, brother.
What's up, Mr. Tran? So welcome, everybody. I guess it's not just about my story. It's also about helping you guys get into buying Cashflow Properties. My story is obviously going to be different than everybody else's story. But a little bit about me. I went to Widener University. I graduated high school in 1999. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I lived on campus, and I was renting off campus, and I lived in a really bad house, and I was like, I could do this. I mean, I could buy one of these houses. So I bought my first house in 2003. I got three roommates to live with me. They helped pay the mortgage. And that was kind of how it started. I was like, I think I can keep doing this. And that was how it started, Mr. Tran, I guess in 2003 at Widener.
Okay, wait, can I ask you some question? Like, when you said you lived with some roommates, how did you start getting into properties? Like, what was your thinking process? What did you see?
So I was renting a house, and my rent was about $800 a month. And I had a roommate, and the house was in horrendous condition. So I felt like I was probably 19 years old at the time, and I felt like I could do this, and I can give somebody a better house and charge them a lot more money. And I kind of saw the opportunity because when I was living off campus at Widener, all of the houses were in really bad condition. And I felt like if I just started buying some houses, fix them up a little bit better, put some granite countertops in, stainless steel appliances, it would be like something that I could successfully do. So I just took it one house at a time. At the time I was buying a couple houses per year. I was buying them with private money, fixing them up, refinancing them. And that was kind of how it happened, Mr. Tran.
So when you first started, how did you find your first property? Like, what did that look like for a college student that's only 19?
So I was driving around the neighborhood. At the time, there weren't that many real estate events like this. It was one of my bigger mistakes in the beginning that I wasn't able to jump into real estate events. I didn't know that they existed at the time. So I was driving around and talking to a lot of other landlords. And I saw them in their trucks, and I would stop them and ask them a laundry list of questions. And sometimes they would want to drive away when they saw me coming. But this one guy, Tom Brawley, I used to stop him twice a week, and he would always get mad. Now he's one of my good buddies. But that was how I did it, because I guess the internet and these events weren't really happening in 2002 very much.
Can you give us an example of what a 19-year-old asked as questions? Like, what kind of questions did you ask at 19?
Probably how to find houses, how to be a landlord. I think he actually told me to go to some golden feather site, for first-time home buyers. So it was HUDHomestore.com, and I went there, and that was my first house. Had to be owner occupied. So I bought the house. I moved into it. A couple people actually verified that I was living there because they were mad at me for getting the deal, and they missed out on it.
How do you get your first financing? Did you have your parents to help you out, or because I hear you talk about private money?
Yeah, so my parents helped me with some money in my first couple of houses, and my stepbrother, unfortunately, their father passed away, and they had a trust fund with about $100,000 in it. So my first house was $30,000, and I think I put about $10,000 of my money in. I think I borrowed about $30,000 from my stepbrother's trust fund, and then I think my dad let me borrow about $15,000. So the total investment was maybe $50,000 or $60,000. Bought it, fixed it up, lived in one of the bedrooms, and then I got three roommates that were paying $400 per month per room. So I was living there, and I was making pretty good money for my first house. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I need to find a way to recreate this and do it again.
So at 19, I mean, $60,000 is a lot of money. Did you know how to do construction?
I didn't know how to do construction. The guy that I hired was for $20 an hour, and I was his helper. So he was working every day for me. And even though he was working for me, I kind of worked for him. So we worked together. I was doing depot trips a couple days a week, a couple times a day sometimes. And, me and him fixed up this whole house together. Just me and him. We did it.
Was this a friend of yours?
No, it wasn't a friend of mine. I think I found him by another house in the neighborhood, actually. A lot of houses that were under construction, I would always walk in and just start talking to whoever was there. So he was working on a house down the street, and I liked the job that he was doing. So I think that's good advice, actually. Sometimes just to pop into a job site and walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Nathan. I'm buying a house down the street, or I want to start buying around here." It can lead to, normally people aren't going to throw you out of the house. And that's worked well for me over the years.
Wow. So you just met someone down the street?
He was working on a job. I walked into a house that was getting renovated. And Mr. Tran, we both talked to everybody. So I just walked into the job site, and his name was John Mayhew. He was a little bit of a crazy guy, but he was skilled. He was a good plumber, a good electrician. And he was kind of a jack of all trades, I guess. So he put the heater in, he did the electrical. He quit actually on one of the bathrooms in the tile job, and then he came back. So I had to finish tile on my own. It doesn't look very good.
Wow, that's insane. And you finished it. How long did it take you to finish your first? Was it like a single family or was it a multi-family?
It was a row home. It was a row home, like a block from Widener. We didn't drywall the house, so it wasn't like a ton of work. It was more of like a cosmetic kind of rehab. But it probably took us a couple months. Looking back on it, we both had no idea really what we were doing. The guy that I hired wasn't that good, but he was good enough to get the job done. He was a born-again Christian.
All right, that's an amazing start. Just recapping, at 19, you found a property, you figured out you can rent to other students next to a university, and you found a fixer-upper, raised the money from friends and family, and ran into a contractor that you learned how to do construction with, and did your first house together, and realized that you both didn't even know that you didn't know how to do good construction, and you still made it.
A lot of people thought that it wasn't going to work out. I didn't really know at the time. I think my parents and some relatives were a little bit pessimistic about the whole thing. But things are always going to go wrong during the process, and it's about figuring out a way to get through it, because bad things are going to happen, a lot doing this stuff, and you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. Just figuring out a way to fix whatever goes wrong. You both know, there's bad days in real estate. You have to just deal with it. You have to not let it affect your life, and figure out a way to get through it.
And did you have friends in the business that you can ask for help or anything, or you just went out there?
I didn't have anybody. I didn't have any friends in the business, not at all. I didn't have any friends. Just other landlords in the neighborhood that I was stopping and asking questions to on a regular basis.
Wow. All right, that was amazing. I'm blown away right now, by how you just started. Let me pass the torch to Albert while I'm soaking this in. That was amazing. Albert, please share your story of how you got started. You have an amazing story.
Well, I was actually originally from New York, so when I was buying properties, it was actually a lot more. My first house, I bought it for about $220,000, and the crazy thing was, I thought it was a good idea to do a big rehab on my first house, and I was like, I'm gonna change all the mechanicals, the electrical, everything. And obviously, being new, I was just like under budget everything, so I could make the numbers as good as possible. So I went into a house, I closed on it, and the first thing that I realized was that, holy crap, I need to do all these things, and I don't. One of the first things that happened to me was that my place got robbed. So I was planning to keep all the old plumbing, everything's all good in here. We're just going to turn it around real quick. And then all of a sudden it turned into oh, wow, now the house has no pipes. Now I have to redo all the radiators. It was crazy. So, I definitely wouldn't recommend it, especially because if I was looking back at what I did, I was really lucky because I had to borrow extra money from my grandma to get the project finished. But Originally, like how I actually got the money to get it done was that, I had some, stock investments and those did well. So I said, screw the stock market. I'm just going to move out of the stock market, buy something that generates cash flow. And so that's how I ended up heading out of the stock market and ended up buying my first property.
Oh, wow. So, Albert, when you first came here from New York, so it proved that New Yorkers do come to Philly, how do you find your first deal? Like, what was that journey like? Did you knock on doors? Did you go to real estate events? Like, how do you get started?
Well, one of the first things that I did was I went to get educated. So I went to a real estate investment event, and they were like, "Hey, look, knock on doors, write down addresses, just go hustle, right?" So like I was just going through neighborhoods, writing addresses down of like houses that look like kind of not maintained. I was knocking on doors, like talking to them, "Hey, do you know where I can find this house?" Stuff like that. I was just talking to everybody in the neighborhood because I was like, I'm gonna go find a deal. So that's how I kind of started doing that, and then also I started talking to people at the RIA group, and that's how I actually found this deal. Someone was like, "Hey, look, this is a good deal. This person can't find a buyer to close on it, and they need you to come in to close on it." I was like, "All right, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but we'll make it work." So.
Nice.
Gotcha. So you did try knocking on doors, and then you went to a real estate meetup. Did you buy your first deal? Do you work with wholesalers? Do you work with realtors?
Actually, the first deal I actually found was actually in Nick's RIA. Nick was like, "Hey, there's someone in this RIA that has a deal that I think you might want to buy," and then he just said, "Hey, you go talk to him," and I looked at the deal. I drove there, and it seemed pretty nice. So I ended up going through and buying the property.
Yeah, I remember when I first met you coming from New York, and now I feel like it's revisiting that time. It's pretty cool.
I think my pig's in the back. You guys see my pig?
Oh yeah, I see it.
There he is.
I also see your kids chasing it around.
Yeah, he's big. He's big.
He's a nice pig, yeah.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, I was saying I remember you coming from New York, Albert, and I feel like I'm going back in time asking you this question again. Like, what did a good deal look like for you coming from New York? Because it's a whole different market. Like everyone's a millionaire in New York. You know what I mean? Like, what did like a good deal look like? To you in Philly, because everything is so different. How do you figure out what's a good deal to you? Like, what was your process like?
Well, in New York is obviously different because you're not anticipating getting a super high return. So I was just looking at it and saying, hey, look, I need to get like at least an 8% return based on all the money I have into this property. So if I were looking back at it now, I would say that it is an 8 cap, which means that if you make 100,000, you're generating 8,000. So if you spend 100,000, you're generating 8,000 a year. So that's how I kind of looked at it. But when I came into Philly, what I started to look at is like, all right, what's the relative price points of what I can buy right now, and what's the how much cash can I get back for cash invested? And I'm not even looking at debt right now. I'm just saying, if I invest 100,000, how much am I going to get back? And when I was looking in Philadelphia, I was like, okay, you'll net $1,200 for every 100,000 you put in. That's after that's after paying all the expenses minimum. So I was like, oh, look, it's a 12 cap. It makes sense after doing all the renovations. So that's what I looked at when I came over here, and I was kind of also gauging a couple other different things, like how's the economy here? What are the people moving in? What are the trends? And that's how I ended up looking and ended up pulling the trigger when I was looking at Philly.
So what made you come here from New York? Like, what made you decide to leave and come here?
Oh man, I've been through so many evictions in New York that just going through one of those makes you thankful that we have a 3-month eviction process in Philadelphia. In New York, sometimes like the worst tenant I had evicting took 12 months. So you can imagine you can imagine how long and how annoying that was. And, at some point, Philadelphia is going to do the same thing, but then I'm just going to go move to another state that's, less tedious, or a different county, So that's how I kind of looked at it. Is like, relative to New York, what can I generate the highest net return? And so I take into account, like, what worst case scenario, what would happen, best case scenario, what would happen, and then let's go find a medium. So that's kind of how I said, look, Philadelphia works out of all the closest cities. I was looking at, Newark, I was looking at Elizabeth, New Jersey. I was looking at all these places, but the relative return based on like how much hassle you had to go through was at least in Philadelphia. So.
And Albert, a little bit about your background from New York. Like, what were you doing before? Like, when you first came here, were you weren't 19, like Nate, And so, like, were you more financially established? Did you have savings, or did you have family to help you out with purchases? Like, what was your situation before you came here?
To Philadelphia?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I was working in real estate, doing hard money loans. So I kind of had a couple of relationships with private lenders.
Okay.
And what I did was I said, hey, look, I want to go buy some of these houses because, like, why am I giving these people money to make money? It's like, I could do it myself. So I ended up, talking to these people and saying, hey, look, I got some opportunities out in Philadelphia. And, I talked with somebody else to partner up with me to do the equity part, everything that I would need for, like, covering interest, paying for rehabs that weren't covered by the hard money. So that's what I put together, like a little team, like my private lenders, and then also my equity people. So they kind of like worked together with me, and we ended up buying a couple of houses out in Philadelphia.
And as you kept growing, like, did you run into any problems, and how do you overcome them?
The biggest problems I ran into were with renovations. I mean, if you do renovations and you want to save a buck or two, like, sometimes I found that I was spending more money than if I had just done it right the first time. I was hiring contractors. I didn't know much about construction, and plus I was managing this from afar in New York. And people were like, "Oh, it's done. Let me send you pictures," and they would just send me pictures of, like, the best looking stuff in the house, and, like, it's kind of like a half-ass rehab. I mean, I know what a half-ass rehab was. I mean, I've seen a bunch of those things. So I was like, what is this crap? Like, you missed it. Like, workmanship is, like, okay because you're not showing up all the time. So, level of construction quality was really low, and sometimes, I was getting callbacks after these things were finished from tenants saying, "Hey, look, you didn't finish this thing," or, like, "There's a problem, there's a leak," and I'm like, "We just fixed this thing, like, shouldn't be any leaks." But we ended up having to go back and spend extra money because it's like, okay, the guys didn't do it right in the first place, and I had no idea how to get things done properly. I didn't even know what the proper way to get things done were. And I think one of the biggest ways I learned was through my hard money lender at Krauthamer. They kind of were, Craig was one of the construction guys there, and he's like, dude, if you have any questions about construction, just call me. I'll let you know if you're doing this thing right or wrong. And from working with him over like 10, 12, I don't know how many loans I've done with him, maybe 15. I was just like, it came to a process where I was learning, like, more specifically how things should have been done. And, I made my people go back to actually get it fixed correctly. And from there, I started to build a process, get a little bit better at what I was doing, and I actually moved down here so I can oversee the construction projects.
That's awesome, man. Wow, it's like I'm listening to, like, two different stories. You got the 19-year-old full of testosterone just coming out here and doing things and winging it. And then I got more, like, matures, like, you got savings, and you left New York, just coming to Philly and starting fresh. It's like you guys started new, and it's two different stories. It shows that, like, as long as you stick with it, you'll make it. And, for you, Albert, you found your hard money lender, which I'm pretty sure today is your friend, that is helping you learn the process, learn the game of construction. And it shows that, like, because a lot of time people, when they think of hard money lender, they're trying to find cheaper alternatives, but it shows that it paid off for you, because I'm pretty sure like you just did 10, 15 deals with them, and I'm pretty sure that's just like in a year or so, so.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, like, I look at it and I say, all right, cool. Like, I looked at how much interest I paid last year. I was like, damn, I could have bought like a couple of houses with this stuff. But I think if I hadn't had those lessons, I would have probably been a lot worse off. And I probably would still be in New York, and I probably would have quit the business.
Thank God for hard money lenders. That's one to share.
Dave, I came up with a couple of things that I was thinking about in terms of like somebody just getting started in real estate, like that I think would be important looking back that I should have done in the very beginning that maybe I didn't. I don't know if you want me to tell you a couple of them if you wanted to.
Please, so I can record this and watch this over and over, Nate.
I was thinking just from looking back in the beginning, building your credit is something that's very important to start doing early. Learning to figure out what a good deal is and what's not a good deal. It's something that a lot of people have a hard time figuring out. A lot of people look at a house, I'm sure you guys know. It's challenging for anybody to do, but really to be able to evaluate a house in a neighborhood and to break it down, to know when you're done, this house is going to be worth $110,000, or it's going to be worth $300,000. It's a skill that takes a long time to learn, and without really understanding the way the MLS works really well, it's not possible to do. So you need to have a realtor that really, really understands the MLS, or maybe you can get their password and you can learn how to do it. Another one, banking relationships. I think building banking relationships early is huge. Meeting local bankers that like you and want to do business with you. Private money and hard money, learning how to find private money, how to find hard money. And then, construction management is really important. And learning how to become a good landlord is something also that I think is very important. There's a lot of landlords that aren't good landlords, and my tenants are kind of like my employers. They're basically my employer. Like, if they don't get along with me, then they're going to move out and they're not going to stay that long. Maybe they'll like yell at me at landlord-tenant court. So if you can't find a way to retain your tenants long term, then it's hard to make money being a landlord with houses in general. But I don't know. Those are a couple notes I just figured out.
Those are really good notes. Really good notes. Like you mentioned about lenders. You got conventional, you went private, went hard. Can you explain a little bit of when you should use each?
So private money and hard money are pretty similar. Private money is more of like a relative or a friend or a friend's parent, like IRA money. They might not know how to lend you the money, so you have to learn how to get them to give you the money. Hard money lenders are sophisticated, and maybe it's not their money. Maybe they raised the money, and they know what they're doing. And their rates are normally going to be, significantly higher with hard money. And banking relationships, obviously, it's just borrowing money from a bank. Local commercial banks are what I've used, and meeting decision makers that work for local banks is, I think, a very important thing, because when they go to their committee meeting, if their word means a lot at the committee meeting, then your loan's going to get approved. You don't want to I don't want to be worried that the loan's not going to get approved until the last second. So I like working with bankers that have a big say in the bank that they work in. Did you have any construction problems like Albert did, and how do you overcome that for yourself? I had a lot of construction problems. I mean, I think the biggest thing is hopefully the person you're hiring hopefully is not a crook. Hopefully they know what they're doing, and don't let them get too far ahead of you with money, because if you give them too much money in the beginning, the chances of seeing them again might not be that high. So giving them a half deposit and then crossing your fingers that they're going to show up, is sometimes a mistake. Maybe you have to buy the materials in the beginning to establish the relationship, so you don't have to give them that big deposit. But at the same time, the materials you're buying, so they don't need that money in the first place. But yeah, if you don't manage the guys good doing the work, then you're going to get smoked early, and you're going to get ripped off, and it happens to people all the time. It happens a lot of times. I mean, I've gotten ripped off for a couple $1,000s here and there. It happens. It happens to everybody, but just finding a way to not make it happen all the time.
Yeah, so that's really good thing to point out too, to let people know that you did lose some money. Albert, did you lose any money?
I lost plenty of money on the construction side, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I also moved down here, because I was kind of just giving people draws. They're like, hey, I need 6,000, I need 3,000. I was just like, all right, cool, here it is. And I wasn't watching how far they were versus how much I was actually paying out. And some of these guys got ahead of me, and eventually, they ended up leaving the job. So I was just like, all right, what am I gonna? I'm stuck now. What do I do? So I ended up having to, rely on the markets coming up, and the values going up to actually help bail me out of some of these issues. So that's just what it is. Yeah, it's just weird stuff like that, and one of the biggest things that I found is that I've heard like all these things that you should do, but the thing is, like, I'm stubborn, so I just want to do it my way. I don't just shut up and just listen to whoever's like whoever, like my mentor. He was in this game for like over 30 years. He's like, Albert, don't give them money up front. And I'm like, I don't have anybody else. They need a deposit right now. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna give it to them because I need to get it done. But that desperation to get it done was probably a downfall. It's just like, look, sit and wait. At the end of the day, it'll save you more money to get the right, to manage your relationship correctly. And even though you might a little bit more, you're going to get it done on time. And that's the biggest thing, especially when you're doing hard money, is that there was projects that I had that were supposed to go for supposed to get cashed out in 6 months that went 9 months. And man, all that interest payments, holy crap. That's a learning lesson in itself. The interest payments alone. You think like if you borrow 100,000, you're looking at about 9 months of $9,000 extra on top of construction budget because your guy didn't finish. So I could have just paid someone to do better work if I could have got it done on time, and I would have saved that extra money from the time frame. So that's a very important thing to look at when you're dealing with hard money, because I learned that super fast. Like, holy shit, like my projects are running too long. These guys were getting it done, but they were just taking 6 months to finish a project. And I'm like, where the hell are you going? And later on, I found out they're using the money to build their own bars and stuff like that. And when they had extra money, they'll come and do my project. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, hey, how come you only have one guy here? Like, what's going on? I gave you X amount of $1,000. We should have been more finished than this. So, it's kind of managing that kind of dynamic relationship and pricing.
So you got hands-on,
Mm-hmm.
and you pretty much watched it step by step, and you made sure that the amount of work was being done promptly. And I guess you had a schedule learning from your hard money lender of what should be done when, correct?
Yeah, half of this was just kind of just kind of free balling, just doing whatever. I don't know if that was the best idea. Looking back at it, I was like, I probably should have just bought rented properties and then just started from there, because that would have saved me a ton of time. And plus, I'll just be working on managing the existing people as opposed to building and doing rehabs, then doing management at the same time, and doing all these things. Because I just came in here and I was like, let's go buy everything because it's so cheap. That's the worst thing to do, is to go too fast.
The New Yorker in you, man.
Okay, I'll just go buy a house here. I'll just go buy this house. I'm not in a super rush. I think I had FOMO when I came in, fear of missing out. I was like, I gotta go get in this market. But then I was just like, look, these deals, they're not gonna go away. Even though Philly's going up, relatively speaking, with when you factor in the legal issues and all the other stuff, it's way better to be here anyway. So you'll probably see there's still gonna be timing. There's still gonna be neighborhoods that'll be coming up, and that's just what it is.
Yeah, man, that's
Is
great.
anybody watching us? No one has any questions?
Yeah, there is some questions. I was gonna go there next.
I can't see them on my screen, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, let's see. Let me read them. What are you looking at? These are. I'm just gonna read the question. We're looking to buy more turnkey properties with only cosmetic renovations as our first. Is it possible to make a good enough return with the strategy in Philly? And what price range would you be looking for in a townhouse using the strategy? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so turnkey rentals, I think it's a great, I mean, as Albert was just saying, he kind of thought maybe he should have done that early on. Buying turnkey rentals, I think is a great idea, but I mean, the biggest variable, in my opinion, is buying turnkey rentals in a neighborhood that you feel has a bright future. And if you do that, you probably have income from somewhere else. It's probably not your only income in real estate. And if you're buying a lot of neighborhoods in Philadelphia have a really bright future ahead of them. And if you can do it there and break even, every month, maybe make a little bit of money, next thing you know, your $150,000 house you're going to be paying down your debt, and it's going to be worth $300,000 before you know it. So yeah, I think it's a great strategy, and I think most of the city you can do it in, as long as you're not in the really expensive parts of town.
Okay, that's good. Albert, anything on you?
About buying turnkey? Yeah, I mean, right now, like Philadelphia has been historically a cash flow market, and just recently it started to transition to an equity market, which means that the spreads are getting bigger. So you're making less cash flow, but on the flip side, you're making more equity. But also on a downturn, you're going to lose more money in the equity, but you'll still be able to, the spread is not that big. In New York, the spread from cash flow to what you buy it for is very high. So like you'll pay a lot of money for a little bit of cash flow. But in Philadelphia, it's still pretty fair in terms of value for what you're paying to get the cash flow. So, in New York, you'll probably pay $100,000 to get $6,000 a year. In Philadelphia, you'll probably pay right now. I mean, when I came in, it was probably like $12,000 for every $100,000 you invested. But maybe now it's going down to like $8,000, $9,000. So I would just look for that. And the key thing with turnkey rentals, because I seen all these kind of like turnkey companies in my neighborhood doing rehabs, and I see some of them just don't know how to do rehabs at all. You want to look up what companies, not the selling company. You want to look up what's their management company called. You want to look up like any tangential companies that they have and say, hey, look, this guy reputable. Like you'll start to see like some of these guys have like terrible reviews. And like, get tenants saying, hey, look, this thing broke, whatever, on a day one. You're like, what the hell? Who are you hiring? The key too with turnkey is the management. When I first got in, I was just like, I'm gonna go manage myself. Yeah, I could do that. It took a lot of time, and it was a pain in the butt. And second stage for me was like, hey, I'm gonna go hire a property manager because they could do it better than me. Not all property managers are built equally. Some they really, really not that great. I'm just going to say it that way. I lost money on property managers. I've made money on property managers. And it's not necessarily the cheapest property managers either, because like there's property managers where I was paying like 4 or 5%. Property managers, I was paying 10%, but the 10% ones I felt like I was getting more value. And plus they had everything done and I wasn't waiting to ask them a question. There's some in between. Like I mix up my managers based on like areas that I'm in. Some are better suited for like rougher areas. Some are better suited for like nicer, cleaner, higher end tenants. So those kind of things to look at, especially when you're doing a turnkey, is like quality of the person who's selling you the turnkey. Because if they're doing trash work, then you're going to have a lot of maintenance issues. And I've talked to investors that have had houses that they bought from turnkey people who, kind of cut a lot of corners, and they end up paying out the nose for maintenance. And the second thing is, when you're doing these turnkeys, you want to make sure that you align yourself with a property manager that is suitable for the type of property you do. And I wouldn't necessarily look at price. I would be more focused on, are you going to be able to deliver without me having to call you like 7 or 10 times a week? I mean, I just need like, there were some pretty bad managers I ran into. Multiple, actually. I've hired 4 property managers. And right now I'm like, I'm using 2 of them. One of them I prefer more than the other, but the other one is cheaper but gets it done in certain areas. So that's just what it is.
That's good. Got another question. How would you structure a loan from a family member or friend by Bill Clothier?
So a loan from a family member or friend. I mean, it depends if you have any money to put in the deal or not. But either way, you'd want to give your lender a mortgage You don't want to give them a note. You don't want to record the mortgage. It's safe for you, for them to record it. It's safe for them. And hopefully they could fund the whole deal. And maybe, you know, if it's like the whole project's $100,000, hopefully they could fund the acquisition and the renovations. And then the goal would be to pay them back through a refinance after the project's done. Hopefully you're all into it for, you know, I don't know, 70, 75% loan to value. So you could refinance it and give them all of their money back. But you don't want to lose your family's money. You don't want to lose anybody's money. So you do need to be a little bit careful with what you're doing. You need to make sure you're making the right decisions.
Yeah, I actually have an answer for that too. If you go back to the earlier morning at 9 a.m. today with Joe Console, he did private lending done right. He's a lawyer that does all the paperwork and everything. So he can give you good tips if you just go back and watch that.
Yeah, Joe's done some private loan documents for me as well. He actually did some a couple of weeks ago for me.
All right. I think that's pretty much a wrap. I mean, the last question I got here is, what is the best areas in PA?
Man, it depends what you're looking for. I mean, you want an investor or do you want a Rittenhouse Square, you know?
Yeah, that's a broad question. Every time someone's looking, they're always looking for what's the best. You first got to figure out what you want in terms of your return, what area you're comfortable with. You got to go out there and get a feel for these areas. You gotta like it. You gotta see the future, like Nate says. Man, good talking to you guys. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David.